The experts said it was impossible, unthinkable. Organized crime doesn't work that way. It could never happen. But the evidence proved them wrong. For years, rumors have circulated that the world's leading crime syndicates hold top-secret summit meetings where the dark lords of the underworld plan strategies for spreading the virus of drugs, vice, and corruption. At first, law enforcement dismissed rumors of a United Nations of crime as sheer nonsense. They believed that cultural differences, intense rivalries, and competitive zeal would forever prevent international crime bosses from teaming up in an underworld federation. The major crime organizations were always seen as independent sovereign empires, each operating within a specific territory. Today, organized crime has been traced to all regions of the globe. The traditional zones of influence have overlapped, eclipsing the power of law enforcement. To track the spread of organized crime, computer profiles have been established of the leading international syndicates.
Historically, if you're looking at the roots of the mafia in Sicily and in Italy, you can trace it back to really the history of this country being overrun by a whole bunch of different cultures, the French, the Spanish, Phoenicians. There's never been much of a law enforcement apparatus on the island.
The Russian Mafia is an extremely problematic group for law enforcement, and what makes them different is that here you're talking about some extremely bright individuals who are experts at carrying out a whole range of activities that are illegal. Everything from illegal immigration to insurance fraud to crimes within Russia to a growing involvement here in the United States.
They have a very checkered history. They go back 300 years. But it was only during the 1920s and 30s that they were able to make their mark and prepare the way for what we know as the modern gangs or yakuza today.
And really, the modern American Mafia, as we know it, was born up on those streets in the boyhood rumbles of guys like Luciano, Lucchese, and Frank Costello, and Vito Genovese. They all knew each other, and they were all in the same, what was called a brigata. Brigata means like a gang.
Pablo Escobar, along with the other members of the Medellin cartel, were able to mass market the cocaine, which made it, they controlled everything from production to transportation and distribution. So it became a cartel as opposed to just two independent type groups working together.
The relationship between crime organizations has always been that of bloody power struggles, fueled by cultural mistrust and hatred. Ever since the 30s, there's been bad blood between the Sicilian and American mafia. It started when Lucky Luciano and Tommy Lucchese rubbed out their Sicilian don, Joe Masseria. The rising stars of the American underground then hit Godfather Salvatore Maranzano. His murder wiped out Sicilian competition for decades. Since those bloody days on Brooklyn streets, the Sicilian mafia has hated their American rivals. Naturally, the American mafia never trusted the Sicilians. Fearful of the competition from the Sicilian heroin empire, Colombia drug lords also disliked the Cosa Nostra. In turn, many crime bosses shunned the Colombians. Who could do business with coke-snorting billionaires, they reasoned. Meanwhile, the chief competitors in the Eastern Hemisphere, the Russian Mafia and the Yakuza, always despised each other. And Japanese mobsters are known to never trust a gangster who isn't Japanese. It was always thought this mutual hostility and competitive zeal was more lethal than bullets or wiretaps in preventing the alliance of criminal organizations, but no longer.
You see alliances among organized crime groups, each of them capitalizing on their strengths, their knowledge of a particular region, and they've also been extremely clever at using the computers for a whole variety of their activities, from promoting drug trade to transferring money around the world to laundering money offshore and using it and encrypting their files so that law enforcement can't even find out what they're up to.
It now appears a worldwide merger of the major criminal organizations is underway. If it succeeds, organized crime will be the largest business enterprise on the planet. Ironically, it was a crackdown by law enforcement that sparked the first partnership of international criminal syndicates. In 1987, over 300 gangsters from the Sicilian Mafia stood trial on charges ranging from murder to heroin trafficking. It was called the Maxi Trial. Government resources poured into Palermo as prosecutors prepared to undertake the largest trial in Italian history. The prosecutor's office was provided with all the support needed to move the trial forward safely and efficiently. A fortified courthouse was built to protect the participants. Tanks and army troops surrounded the perimeter.
They had cages built for the defendants, they had glass booths, they had hundreds of guards. It was just a tremendously secure situation to try these mafia members. And the mafia members throughout the trial would spit at the authorities and yell obscenities. And in one case, one of them actually stapled his lips together to show he would not break the code of omerta, the code of silence.
For centuries, the oath of silence has protected the Sicilian Mafia. But in the 80s, the light of justice and the courage of a man pierced their dark shroud of secrecy. Judge Giovanni Falcone believed in the power of law, believed the truth of justice could illuminate the shadow of lies that shielded the Cosa Nostra.
Falcone was a man of faith. He never really talked about it very much, but it was his faith in justice and his faith that carried him through, that gave him the strength to go on.
Out of the hundreds of mobsters on trial, Falcone had his sights set on Tito Riina, the godfather of the powerful Corleone family. If Falcone could bring down the Corleones, he would drive a stake through the heart of the entire mafia. But Falcone was up against an extremely cunning and ruthless criminal. He was called the Beast.
Riina does not speak Italian well, speaks no other languages to my knowledge, has really not traveled outside of Italy and Sicily, and made no effort to be involved in or interested in international matters other than narcotics trafficking. At the same time, he has an extraordinary memory. People say that he never forgot any slight or any favor, and would reward those who favored him and eliminate those who had slighted him.
He is known among his fellow mafiosi as an extremely tough, cruel man, a person not given to random violence, but a person whose sort of fundamental instinct is to eliminate anyone who might be of danger to him.
The 1987 Maxi trial was a major victory for justice. 300 mobsters were convicted. The nation rejoiced. Falcone was a hero. But his targeted quarry had escaped. The Beast had gone to ground. Convicted and sentenced to a life term, Riina had disappeared, leaving his minions to vent his rage.
Mafia members were furious and became like a kind of wounded beast. after the convictions. They were furious. They were furious at their friends in power, and they were determined to make them pay.
Breaking the cutthroat yoke of the Cosa Nostra made Judge Falcone a marked man, #1 on the Mafia's hit list.
He was protected by bodyguards in bulletproof cars, lived in an apartment that was really more like a bunker. His office could only be entered through a series of doors with cameras looking at who was entering. But he was philosophical about it. He was certainly not fatalistic, believed that the enemy was after him, but wanted to accomplish what he could.
Bodyguards, bulletproof limos, escorts of armed officers, all were useless against the wrath of Tito Riina. It was a pleasant day in September of 1992.
That Saturday he had traveled down to Palermo to visit his wife, who was a magistrate in Palermo, and was going to be one of his last trips there. And undoubtedly the Mafia knew that and had set out a plan to kill him.
They had people in Rome who were able to communicate by cellular phone. The moment that Falcone left his office, someone waiting at the airport would then communicate to people in Palermo. The plane is taken off and it's heading toward Palermo. There were people waiting outside the airport to signal his arrival. And then a couple of miles from the airport, a squad of mafiosi had placed an enormous quantity of explosives in a kind of drain pipe that was underneath the highway itself, so that then, on a signal from someone else, they then detonated this truly massive quantity of explosives.
The explosion killed Judge Falcone, his wife, and 3 bodyguards. The assassination had shown the Mafia to be what they always were, animals, led by a man who truly was a beast. The country wanted the Mafia banished from Sicily forever.
People were fed up with what was going on. They were fed up with people like Riina. They had lost that sense of support that the Mafia had traditionally had, where the Mafia helps poor people and helps them solve problems and looks out for them, helps them in their times of need and so on. The Mafia was not being seen that way. The Mafia was being seen as a predatory organization, and that the only people being helped were those themselves and perhaps some of the highest level people in the Italian government.
Realizing the Cosa Nostra was no longer ruler of their homeland, Tito Riina and other Sicilian godfathers began searching for new opportunities on foreign shores. Before his death, Judge Falcone warned that if the Sicilians were not stopped, they would spearhead the formation of an international criminal coalition. The judge's warning was ignored. But in 1989, a drug trafficker was picked up on a routine smuggling charge. The story he told sent shockwaves through law enforcement agencies. It appeared Judge Falcone's prophecy had come true.
State your name for the record.
Giuseppe Gaffaro.
Where do you reside, Mr. Gaffaro?
Palermo, Sicily.
Do you have any knowledge of the Corleone family or anyone by the name of Tito Riina?
Yes.
Yes, a simple word. But if true, Gaffaro broke the Sicilian code of silence.
I work for one of the top men in the Madonna family. His grandfather and Tito Riina. They want him to make a deal with the Colombians.
Questions ripped through the agents' minds. Had they stumbled on a Mafia insider willing to talk?
I want full immunity.
Or perhaps Gaffaro was just a lying, desperate criminal hoping for a reduced sentence.
Okay, Giuseppe.
I'm Medellin.
In western Colombia, there is a pastoral countryside of cattle ranges and lush green fields. Here reside the massive plantations of the Medellin cartel. In the 80s, much of the cocaine smuggled into America came from Medellin. Each year, the harvest of coca plants yielded billions of drug money for the boss of the cartel, Pablo Escobar.
I can't think of any single example of a criminal figure that has ever accumulated a personal fortune the size of Pablo Escobar's. He had women, he had horses, he had beautiful fixtures in his homes, he had an antique car collection, he had all the rest of it. He was a man who liked to spend his money.
Pablo Escobar had wealth beyond imagining, all derived from a drug empire that was built on the blood and bones of thousands.
Pablo Escobar was a mafia boss. He was a ruthless drug trafficker who probably killed more people than any individual drug trafficker in the history of Colombia. He was a ruthless killer. This man aligned himself with narco-terrorism. He placed bombs on airplanes. He murdered people. Pablo Escobar was no folk hero. He has blood on his hands in Colombia that'll be in their history books for the next century.
A small-time drug pusher may be despised and vilified, but sadly, in this day and age, a murdering billionaire drug trafficker like Escobar is celebrated by some as a man of accomplishment.
People in Colombia loved him, especially in the neighborhood that he grew up where he built hospitals, schools, soccer fields, and he was looked upon as a hero, a Robin Hood, if you will, as opposed to a drug trafficker.
He is one of the men that I think, one of the 10, 20, or 30 people of the late 20th century that I think has really counted, has made a difference. Of course, the vast majority of what he did was extremely unfortunate for Colombia, for the world. But he was the architect of the cocaine industry the way we see it today.
By the late 80s, Escobar's rise to fame and fortune began a steep decline. The boss of the Medellin cartel was a wanted man, fleeing the combined police forces of Colombia and the United States. Special Agent Ramiro Escudero spent 12 years investigating drug trafficking and money laundering for the FBI's Los Angeles Field Division.
So we were, as a government, aware of his power, and we were trying to assist Colombia in either apprehending him or extraditing him to the United States.
Do you know the whereabouts of Pablo Escobar?
No.
Did Mr. Escobar participate in the deal between the Sicilian Mafia and the Medellin cartel?
No, it's just Johnny Gotolo, my boss, and his big shot from the Escobar family.
Where'd the meeting take place?
Aruba.
An island off the coast of Venezuela, Aruba's only resources is its beaches, resorts, and a carefree banking system that matches the island lifestyle. Aruba is a money laundering center for the mobsters of the world. In the late 80s, the Sicilian Mafia was the island's principal landowner.
Did you attend that meeting?
Yeah, sure, I went everywhere Johnny went.
What were your duties?
Backup, you know, make sure everything goes real smooth. Keep my eyes, my ears open. See, we didn't know this Colombian guy, and Johnny, he was kind of worried that he might be a cokehead. And the family, they really wanted this deal to go down. It was up to Johnny to do it. So that first day, Johnny, he was a little bit nervous. You know, I would be too. You don't ever want to displease Tito Rena. Bonnie, he had his own jet. Turned out to be a nice guy, too. He really knew how to enjoy life. Right from the start, he and Johnny got along.
Where did they meet on the island to discuss the deal?
Everywhere. They went fishing, sailing, walking on the beach. All the time they were talking business. I had myself a real good time in Aruba.
The deal, Cufaro. What about the deal?
The way Johnny explained it, Apani caught on right away. Said the deal made good business sense.
What made good sense?
And we trade our heroin for their coke. That way the Colombians could move their heroin while we could move their coke in Europe. So we had the fronts and the networks, and they didn't.
The deal the Sicilian was offering was too good for the Colombians to refuse. Heroin has a higher market value than cocaine, and the Colombians had coke to burn. Plus the distribution costs to Europe were more than it cost to produce the drug. By merging their resources, the two organizations would control the drug market on two continents.
Bondi said he was sure the cartel would agree. Timing was right. And like Johnny said, it made good business sense. All it took was cooperation. Now Ponte. See, now Ponte, he was the one who suggested we use Big John to move the drugs.
Big John. Who's he?
Nah, he's a she and she's a ship, a freighter. In Aruba, we loaded a ton of coke. We could have put on 500 tons. But at Ponte, he said this was just a trial run. And Big John just took off for Sicily. The ship was to offload at a small fishing village on the west coast. I was ordered to call Ponte as soon as I spotted it. I was at that village for 2 stinking weeks. Big John, she came in though, no problem.
What happened then?
We offloaded the coke and then we put on some heroin for the Colombians.
Where did the ship offload the drugs?
Somewhere in the United States, that's all I know.
Other ships followed. Europe was soon buried under an avalanche of Colombian coke distributed by the Sicilians. While in America, Sicilian heroin was flowing in from the Colombian network. The first partnership between two of the world's major criminal organizations exploded in a tidal wave of cash. To clean the billions of dollars in drug money, the Sicilians and Colombians turned to the newest member of the world's international crime club, the Russian Mafia. The meltdown of the Iron Curtain brought anarchy and chaos to the Russian economy. With Big Brother dead and buried, Mother Russia was ripe for the taking by ruthless crooks with great ambitions.
In the last month of 1991, the same month that the hammer and sickle came down over the Kremlin, a large group of Soviet mafia leaders, Russian mafia leaders, met in Dasha, outside Moscow. They'd had many councils and many meetings in the past. This was one of their ways of arranging the government, so to speak, or the governing bodies of crime in the old Soviet Union. And on their agenda, on the top of the agenda, was what to do as the system was imploding around them.
Everything was for sale. Everyone had a price. In this climate of corruption and anarchy, the Russian Mafia infiltrated corporations, banks, and government agencies. They set up shop as the black market brokers and money cleaners for organized crime. The Russian mob's best customer was the Colombian cartels. Engorged with millions from their partnership with the Sicilians, the cocaine kings went on a spending spree. The Colombians lusted for advanced technology and high-tech weaponry. Acting as middlemen, the Russian Mafia sold the Colombians radar jamming technology, munitions, armament, even attack helicopters. U.S. law enforcement was powerless to stop many of the deals between the Colombians and Russians. But one deal they discovered seemed right out of a James Bond thriller. The leading characters were a strip club owner called Tarzan, an undercover agent named Sasha, and a Soviet submarine commander. Some title the operation 20,000 Kilos Under the Sea. Run silent, run deep. Move 100 tons of drugs in a single voyage. It doesn't take a criminal genius to dream up such a scheme, but it does take the combined power of organized crime to make it happen. The plot first came to the surface at Miami's division of the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency. In the early 90s, Miami was a crossroad of the underworld. Jet-setting gangsters from the Chinese triads of Southeast Asia to the nearby Caribbean posses and the mafia families of New York. All the world's crime organizations had field operations in Miami, but the largest migration of criminals was from Russia. The influx of Russian mobsters to Miami was so great, local FBI, DEA, and immigration service officials had informal meetings of what was dubbed the Little Odessa Room. Here they sorted through a bewildering array of rumors, tips, and leads, shuffling through names they couldn't even pronounce. One name they quickly learned was Vyacheslav Ivankov.
I first became aware of Ivankov whenever I was talking to the Russian authorities and asked them to help us identify the major criminals in the United States that came out of Russia. And they provided me the name of Ivankov. Well, when we first started looking at Ivankov, he was bouncing from one city to another. He was primarily in New York City, but he was in Boston, and he was in Denver, and he was in Los Angeles, and he was in Miami, and he was in San Francisco. Then he may go back into Russia to meet with other thieves. To say that he was the major figure in the United States, yes, he was. There's no question in our mind about it. There was no question in the Russian authorities' mind about it. You have to kind of understand that Ivankov's reputation is even bigger in Russia than it is in the United States.
Ivankov began his ascent to the upper regions of the Soviet underground while incarcerated in the brutal Siberian Gulag. Admired by other prison inmates, Ivankov was elected to the status of thief-in-law, a position held by an elite few professional criminals who were powerful, charismatic, and brutally ruthless. In 1991, Ivankov was released from prison. The Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs informed the FBI that Ivankov immediately left for America. His mission? Take control and organize Russian criminal activities throughout North America. Ivankov's base of operation was a Brighton Beach section of New York City. Brighton is cited by the New York press as a center of Soviet emigre organized crime. By 1992, Ivankov was under constant surveillance. The FBI tracked his movements to the major cities of the world. It was no surprise when agents traced Ivankov to Miami. It was around this time that a new name began to pop up with increasing frequency. Tarzan. This was a nickname for a Russian immigrant who settled in Brighton Beach in the late 80s. In the Ukraine, Leonard Feinberg was trained as a dentist. In Brighton, he was known as a friendly, fun-loving guy. But as Feinberg neared 30, he began to change. He started dressing like a gangster, talked tough, and reportedly dreamed of becoming a thief-in-law like his idol Ivankov. In 1990, Tarzan left Brighton, telling friends he was going to make his mark in Miami. To the feds in Miami, Tarzan sounded like just another loser dreaming of the big time. Then they heard that Tarzan was somehow involved in the sale of Soviet helicopters. To determine the truth of the rumors about the wannabe Russian wise guy, they decided to test the feasibility of an undercover operation. A DEA agent who was fluent in Russian was assigned as the undercover operator.
Tarzan ran a strip club called Porky's, and he was basically someone the Russians would go to get girls or drugs. Strictly small-time stuff. But then we started to hear about him and Soviet military equipment, and that's basically when I was brought in. Like Tarzan, I was from the Ukraine and had lived in Brighton Beach.
Tarzan's club was in a red light district near the airport. The initial strategy was to attempt contact and determine if it was possible to get the suspect talking. Sasha's cover was that he was just another Russian immigrant looking to score.
Porky's was a real scumbucket. We couldn't believe that the owner of this joint could be putting together the deals we were hearing about.
A police informer who Tarzan trusted was in place. At first, Tarzan was suspicious, until he learned that Sasha was also born in the Ukraine and had lived in the old neighborhood. Tarzan had taken the bait. The operation was on.
Tarzan had no major hits on his sheet. Only I think a lewd behavior in public charge and some strong-arm jobs. Nothing major at all. So it really seemed odd that we had this whole undercover operation going for this little sleaze bag. But of course, it turned out to be much bigger than we initially thought.
Sasha's job was to become Tarzan's best friend, to get Tarzan talking. To learn what he knows requires Sasha to dress like Tarzan, talk like him, act like him.
Sasha, we should do business together. Two guys from the old neighborhood.
Sure. But what are we talking about?
I want to open up another nightclub like this.
What, Porky's too?
Maybe. Hey, it don't look like much. It makes a bundle. No business. No business is better than money in a club.
Money laundering was not what Sasha wanted to
What
hear.
else you got going on?
But sooner or later, he knew a guy like Tarzan couldn't resist talking about his big deal.
Looks like nightclubs don't interest you. But I got something big. Huge. There are these guys I worked with. I supplied them with bulletproof limos, choppers, that kind of thing. Well, they got in touch with me. And get this. They want a submarine.
A submarine?
Yeah, a sub. A Soviet military submarine with a crew of 25. They want to run drugs up and down the West Coast.
Do these guys have the money?
Do they have the money? These guys have enough money to buy a whole armada. They're the Colombians.
Street surveillance was ordered. A drug smuggling submarine sold by a two-bit punk like Tarzan seemed too fantastic to believe. But the feds were taking no chances. Tarzan's contact with the Colombians was Juan Almedia. The Colombians paid for Tarzan's trips to Russia with sacks of money dropped off by Almedia. Much of the cash Tarzan either banked or spent. Tarzan was on a roll, partying at Porky's, then jetting off, returning with snapshots of subs for sale and boasting about his contacts with the Russian Mafia. But after months, Tarzan seemed no closer to finding a sub. Investigators began wondering if the whole deal was a scam, but the investigation continued.
I told Tarzan that we were going to have to look like experts if we were going to fool the Colombians. I told him, since I had experience in the Marines, I had the contacts we needed to get all the technical advice. I became Tarzan's sub-advisor. He'd come back from Russia with pictures and questions and all, and basically I'd have to fake my way through it. That was pretty easy to do since he didn't know squat about military technology. I never thought the deal would actually happen, but somehow Tarzan came through. He got his hands on a Tango-class diesel submarine. Tarzan told me that the Russians are practically giving away mothballed Soviet subs because the military's broke. So basically that's what happened. He got a civilian agency to approve it as surplus, and they approved the sale for oceanographic research. He even found 25 out-of-work sailors for a crew, and an admiral who figured that skippering a drug sub would be better than, I guess, standing in bread lines.
In Russia, a final meeting was held. The sub was waiting at the dock. With the admiral by his side, Tarzan made his closing pitch.
This is #1 machine in Russia.
But the admiral's English was limited, and the Colombian admitted to only speaking Spanish. So Tarzan translated to Almedia, who translated for the Colombian. Since neither knew a periscope from a torpedo tube, communication was difficult.
Как сказать, it has very, very good displacement, very good for storage, good for cocaine, very good.
Then a problem came up the Colombian heard loud and clear.
There is a little problem. Because machine was in storage, it cannot go under. It doesn't submerge right now. No, it cannot. You have to tow it. But it's okay. It's okay because we tow it. We can tow it. Oceanography it's very good. It's very good machine. We can tow it. I got good cover.
Cover or no cover, the Colombian wasn't buying that a Soviet submarine in tow to Colombia would not attract attention.
Very good cover.
From evidence obtained by the undercover operation, Tarzan was convicted of racketeering.
Tarzan basically turned state's evidence, and he's now in the witness protection program.
You ever have contact with him again?
No, not at all.
The Colombians may have backed out, but the scheme to use a submarine for drug smuggling was a warning shot across the bow of law enforcement everywhere of what can happen when gangs unite. As far as is known, a Soviet submarine has never been used for dope smuggling. But the alliance between the Sicilians, Colombians, and the Russian Mafia did succeed in forming a chain of evil that spanned continents. The final link was forged when East met West as the American Mafia united with the fearsome Yakuza of Japan. New York was a port of entry for most of Europe's immigrants, and it became the breeding ground for some of organized crime's most notorious members. Al Capone, Lucky Luciano, Meyer Lansky, all came from immigrant families who settled in the 5 Points area, a crowded ghetto with a long history of Irish, Jewish, and Italian gang activity. It was here a diverse bunch of ethnic gangs coalesced in the early 1930s. 5 criminal groups or families emerged as a central core of a nationwide crime syndicate generally referred to as the mob.
Really, the modern American Mafia, as we know it, was born up on those streets in the boyhood rumbles of guys like Luciano, Lucchese, and Frank Costello, and Vito Genovese. These were guys who were innovative thinkers. They were smart, they were shrewd, they were not educated in the academic sense, but they understood business. They understood markets. They had all the requisite talents to become great businessmen. But for reasons that we don't quite yet understand, they went in another direction.
The mob's first big break came when the sale of alcohol was banned in the 20s. Profits from bootleg liquor filled the war chests of America's mafia. No longer would mafia families be struggling Italian immigrants from the slums. After World War II, the mafia expanded their operations, hauling in millions from gambling in Las Vegas and Cuba, and from cash cows such as labor racketeering and narcotics trafficking. With politicians and police across the country on their payroll, the mafia was on a roll that seemed unstoppable. Today, mafia godfather John Gotti is in jail, and the old generation of dons have retired to the golf course. Their successors are often brash, stupid, and inexperienced. Good news for law enforcement, as former FBI agent Jules Bonavolonta explains.
The new leaders, the leaders of today, the second and third team, as I have always called them, they're tied not by honor, respect, and family. They're tied by the economy. They're tied by money. They're tied by greed. And greed and money, those ties are much easier to break than honor, respect, and family. So what we're finding is a much less competent mafia leader today.
You know, you ever see those charts? You know, the original Neanderthal or the Lucy, wherever it is, the earliest man that kind of, they look sort of ape-like. But as the time goes on, they get smarter, their brain cases get bigger, and now they're erect Homo sapiens in business suits. It's the opposite way here.
By the 80s, the American mafia was seen as the poor relative of the international crime family. Recently, there has been disturbing evidence the mafia is on the rise, aided by an ally from the East. They began as warriors, protecting the interests of feudal lords. In the 16th century, they became noble protectors, fighting for the rights of the common people. With these roles came power, and power tends to corrupt. Today, the Yakuza are among the wealthiest and powerful of organized crime syndicates, also the most corrupt. In the 60s, the Yakuzas first established a beachhead into America's underworld. It was in the tropical paradise of Hawaii that the gang from the East met their counterparts from the West. Yakuza members often served American mobsters when the Japanese were working as kitchen help in Hawaiian restaurants. Like they say, the Japanese are a patient people. 3 decades later, estimates rate Yakuza investment in American business at $1 billion annually. Now the Yakuza and the American mob conduct joint ventures to the gambling oasis of Las Vegas or Atlantic City. The Yakuza charters planes and fills them with high rollers. Once on American soil, the Mafia takes over the operation. The mob provides luxury accommodations, sex if desired, supervises the action at the tables, bankrolls the losers, and sends enforcers out to collect. If a gambler makes it back to Japan without paying up, the Yakuza will be calling on behalf of their Mafia partners. The alliance between the Yakuza and the U.S. Mafia means that huge amounts of money are streaming across the world. Secret funds that might be supporting the formation of a vast criminal coalition. What began as a terrifying plot hatched on a tranquil island in the Caribbean is fast becoming a reality. By merging their organizations, international crime is now a financial colossus, making an estimated $1 trillion a year. With such wealth, the underworld has risen into the realm of legitimate commerce, positioned to dominate the world. What can be done to stop the growth of this global menace? From the past, we know traditional methods are failing. Judge Falcone finally did get his man. 2 years after Falcone's assassination, the beast was captured. Tito Riina is now serving a life sentence, but today the Sicilian Mafia remains stronger than ever. A few years after the historic Aruba deal, the celebrity coke king Pablo Escobar was gunned down while fleeing from police. Today, the world's appetite for coke is still fed from the deadly harvest at the plantations of Medellin. Johnny Galatolo was arrested on narcotic smuggling charges. Waldo Aponte's whereabouts are unknown, but the partnership they brokered between the Sicilian Mafia and Colombian cartels continued. The Russian mob boss Ivankov is currently serving a 10-year sentence, but Russian crooks say an American prison term is a vacation compared to the Gulag. The wannabe Russian mobster did make his mark in a way. Leonid Feinberg gave names and testimony against the Russian Mafia and is now under federal protection. Tarzan's a marked man, and the Russian Mafia's deadly presence in America continues to grow. Obviously, the solution to prevent organized crime from becoming a global power lies not in the methods of the past. Today, there are close to 200 nations in the world. Each has its own rights of sovereignty, laws and police restrictions. But crime knows no boundaries. Today, organized crime is a shadow nation, undivided. Richard Ward is the executive director of the College of Criminal Justice at Sam Houston University in Huntsville, Texas. He is also an authority on transnational and organized crime.
We don't have an international court, criminal court, for example, so there's no place to take criminals, if you will. So jurisdictions change. One of the real problems is the legal definitions of crime. What is a crime in one country might not be a crime in another country.
There isn't global law enforcement. That's the problem. And so therefore, there isn't an international law enforcement effort that is capable of addressing this problem. The United States is gearing up to fight organized crime, but they're dependent on dealing with the law enforcement of other countries. And sometimes these crime groups are committing their activities in 7 or 8 different countries simultaneously.
If the thought of a global police force or world court is frightening, consider this. Radioactive materials continue to disappear from nuclear arsenals at an alarming rate. No other substance has a greater value on the black market. Many experts say it is only a matter of time before an unholy union is formed between organized crime and a terrorist state. The result? A global menace that threatens the security and safety of all. Organized crime is an outgrowth of a world whose common history is that of war, violence, and bloodshed. In the 20th century, the worship of wealth has reached a zenith among the industrialized nations of the world. As long as societies lust for power, neglect the poor and unfortunate, and promote materialism, organized crime, no matter its origin and language, will continue to plunder the world, enriching itself from our own weakness and greed. I'm Robert Stack. Thanks for joining us.